We have a lot of work to do, and our adversaries are moving quickly to blunt the national security advantages we enjoy because of our space systems. The threats we see from China and Russia have only increased since we had this hearing last year. China has demonstrated on orbit the ability to grapple with another satellite and drag it into another orbit. Russia has demonstrated a ground-launched anti-satellite weapon against one of its own satellites, resulting in a dangerous field of debris that the world is still dealing with. These are just the public examples of China and Russia pushing for dominance in space. Their efforts are especially concerning when considering the provocative actions they are taking in other domains. Top of mind for all of us is Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine that has resulted in the indiscriminate deaths of thousands of civilians. These are the actions of countries that only respond to hard power. In space, that means not only increasing resiliency of future systems, but also having a plan to defend our space assets currently on orbit. Let's speak plainly. China and Russia have already weaponized space. The question left to us is, what are we going to do about it?
Secretary Austin has made clear that China is the department's pacing challenge, and this holds true in space as it does in other domains. The U.S. developed our space architecture in an era when space was more or less a sanctuary. In contrast, over the past decade, China has dramatically increased its quantity and quality of space and counterspace systems in order to develop and field a wartime space architecture. This requires the United States to consider new approaches to ensuring our own use of space, including developing more proliferated and therefore more resilient constellations of our own. Russia also remains a key space competitor. They are developing, testing, and fielding counterspace weapons to target U.S. and allied satellites. And as the ranking member just noted, Russia conducted a destructive test of a direct ascent ASAT missile in November of last year. This created more than 1,500 pieces of trackable debris, hundreds of thousands of smaller pieces, all of which pose a threat to safe space operations in low Earth orbit. This behavior is unbefitting of a spacefaring nation. In contrast, the Department of Defense is committed to promoting standards and norms of responsible behavior to ensure the space domain remains secure, stable, and accessible. As the Deputy Secretary of Defense stated at the December National Space Council meeting, the Department would like to see all nations agree to refrain from anti-satellite weapons testing that creates debris.
Yet I can tell you it's an unprecedented time for the NRO. The pace of technology is accelerating, creating opportunities for both governments and private sector. Satellites are being launched in record numbers. Our competitors, especially China and Russia, are trying to challenge our advantage in space, dedicating money, manpower, and resources, including newer, better weapons and anti-satellite technology. Simply put, it is imperative that we protect our assets and expand our competitive edge. The United States has never before been more reliant on our capabilities in space. Our national security and our modern way of life depend on it.
A study released last year that was commissioned by the Space Force, Defense Innovation Unit, and Air Force Research Laboratory found that China has cornered and is now dominating the global space market. The report recommends that the United States develop new market-enhancing tools to enhance and grow American commercial space activities. What policies and new capabilities do you plan to advocate for in order to promote a more dynamic domestic space marketplace, and where are these reflected in this year's budget request?
As you talked about with the commercial market, there's enormous amount of benefit that comes with commercial, as well as some cautionary tales. First of all, what we've done within the Space Force is we stood up the SSC front door. So we have provided a one-stop shop for all of our commercial partners, whether that be a small startup business or all the way to our primes. So they now have one number, one email address, one website to go to, and that we will paint the path to opportunities depending on what they're offering to bring to the table. As far as what we've invested, space domain awareness is continuing to grow. We spent $135 million on space domain awareness in the past 4 years. The SATCOM arena, that's our biggest investment area. We spent $2.3 billion just over the last 2 years investing in commercial SATCOM. Satellite command and control is a new emerging area. We invested $22 million in there last year. The next emerging one is going to be ISR, and we're just starting to do studies to determine how much ISR we can buy from space. And we're actually going to do it in a reverse industry day to ask industry what they can bring to the table in that domain. Over.
Where are the primary launch sites located, and how many do we have?
Our primary launch sites are Vandenberg, California on the west coast and Cape Canaveral on the east coast.
Is there any concern that in an all-out war scenario, China or Russia could target these sites and hinder our space launch capabilities, especially in light of the hypersonic glide advancements?
Yes, sir, that is a concern of ours every day. We are currently, at the request of Congress, submitting the Range of the Future congressional report. That congressional report outlines many areas of investment in infrastructure and resiliency to ensure that our space launch bases will be there in a time of conflict or crisis.
Dr. Plumb or General Guetlein, we have seen China's impressive ability to blur the lines between benign space capabilities and those that may have utility as counter-space weapons. The most recent example being China's SJ-21 satellite that is engaged in some maneuvers that have raised some red flags. How do you assess these Chinese space threats, and how is the department interacting with these capabilities?
So I'll take a first shot there, Congressman. I'll just say SJ-21 and other capabilities China has put in space or keeps on the ground. There are some dual-use situations there where you could say these are weapons or these are, civilian or civil service or some type of maintenance situation. These are problematic. I think this is where, one, we need to be eyes wide open on the threat that China poses, and I know this committee and this panel is fully aware of that. And second, it does speak to the need for some beginning towards developing norms of behavior in space. Just related to this, I have heard that the Russians at one time wanted to claim that the robotic arm attached to the space shuttle was a weapon because it could grapple a satellite. And so you can see that this is a conversation that really requires bringing folks to the table and trying to understand and have correct behavior so we know when it's weaponized.